Hello, everyone. I hope you're all well. Before I start tonight's show, my name's Avro Hepner, and I'm from the British Deaf Association here in Scotland. Now, tonight's edition of BSL Blethers is going to be about MacMillan Deaf Cancer Support. Now, this is a project that is happening in the UK, and I'm delighted we've got two guests here tonight. One person who has been through cancer, and we'll use this sign for it tonight. Now, I totally appreciate and understand that this is a very sensitive subject for everyone. So, we will be talking about someone who works within the project and provides cancer support, and also with someone who's a cancer survivor, and she'll be explaining about her journey. So I would really put a plea out to anybody who's from the deaf community, or any of our viewers at home. If you get any questions, please put them on the chat, and I'll try my best to ask as many questions as possible on your behalf. As we all know, the cancer is a very sensitive and emotive subject for everyone. So please just remember that and look after yourselves and look after each other. I'm absolutely sure this will be a fantastic conversation, because I just wonder, we've never really had the opportunity since the stigma of cancer has disappeared for the deaf community to actually have a real live debate about it and talk and see what's going on. So without any further ado, I'd love to welcome Nikki Johnson. Hiya, Nikki. How are you doing? And thank
Thank
you for
you.
joining
Hello.
us.
Hi.
Could you just give us a brief description of what you do and things like that?
Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Nikki Johnson, and this is my sign name. And I work for the MacMillan Deaf Cancer Support Project. I'm the manager. So nice to be here. Nice to meet you.
Wow, great. I'll ask you some questions about the project later on, Nikki. If you could just hold for a second, we'll introduce our second guest, and this is Colleen.
How are you, Colleen? Hello.
I'm fine, thank you.
Could you just introduce yourself to us, Colleen? Tell us who you are and what you've been through a little.
Absolutely. My name's Colleen McSorley, and it's lovely to be here.
Well, thank you both for coming. I think this is such an important topic. It's really important to have this discussion about cancer and to have both of your perspectives, Nikki from the professional perspective and Colleen from a personal perspective from your own journey. So the first thing I'd like to ask is actually to Nikki. Nikki, what is the MacMillan Deaf Cancer Support Project? How was it established and where's that emerged from? Okay, so that started with a charity called the Jane Beale Trust. And we've worked together with the MacMillan Cancer Support to try to get some support to deaf people who might be experiencing cancer, to make sure that they have access to information and so on. And because of funding from MacMillan, we were able to work in collaboration with an organisation called Self Help UK, which is where I'm based.
Also, Self Help UK, that is funded by the MacMillan charity. Is that right? And that's how the project was set up.
Yes, that's right. So MacMillan provide the funding and Self Help UK actually established the project and run the project.
Oh, that's lovely. Thank you for that. So how long has the project been going?
This year it'll be 5 years. We were first established in 2018, and we've been running ever since. We've got a new project which we established last year, which is a digital project, So that's been running for, so we were running for 3 years before we got extra funding for support on the digital arm of the project, and that's extended the overall project by 2 years.
So, do you do this on your own, or do you have staff or resources?
Okay, so at first it was just me.
Wow,
Yes,
yourself?
yeah, with Sarah Rolls, who's the boss, my superior, who's provided me with a lot of support. Um, we've now got a new boss, Simon Calvert, and he's running the digital project, again, providing me support with that. And we've been able to bring on 3 deaf staff
Wow,
now, which is
3.
absolutely wonderful. So we've got a real team going on at the moment now. And we've got Claire Ajed, who's a peer group officer,
Okay.
Claire Ahmed.
So what does that mean exactly? What does that job entail?
So her role is a little bit like providing the emotional
Ah,
support on a one-to-one basis, setting up peer groups, um, and liaising with volunteers, coordinating volunteers to make sure that they are well matched to provide the emotional support that people might need. We've also got a part-time admin and referral
okay,
person, and that role is really the first point of contact for anyone,
okay.
and they kind of allocate cases accordingly. Oh, sorry, I should mention the admin's name. That's Louise Dexter. And finally, we have an advocacy officer, and that's Susan Marsh. And she's responsible for everything to do with advocacy. So if you're not happy with your hospital treatment plan or anything like
Wow.
that, if you have any complaints, she deals with that. She offers funding for support, advice around benefits, so
So
many.
information as well, all this information. Wow, it's incredible. You've got yourself, your team, so there's a befriender with all the emotional support. You've got that resource there as well, and you've got the advocacy as well, and help making sure that the journey is as comfortable and easy for someone. This is amazing. That's lovely to see this new information. I'll come back to you later on, Nikki. I just need to ask Colleen a question now. I'm sorry you've been through the experience of cancer. Could you take us back and tell us how it started? It's a long story and I will try my best to be brief, Avro. Basically, I was getting physio for my shoulder. I had this really sore shoulder, but I didn't. There was a lump underneath my sort of oaksters. It was the size of a grapefruit. I mean, you just think of the wee thing. Anyway, I never thought anything of it, and I was going to physio, and at that time it was COVID, so we were
Oh,
using masks. Yeah, and it was a nightmare that I couldn't sort of go to the GP, so I was just going to physio. And I had to pay it privately because this pain I was experiencing coming from my neck right down my arm, I just wanted to just get rid of it. So it was pure accident that I actually said to the physiotherapist, "Look, what do you think this lump is?" And if you'd seen their face, and they immediately just said, "You need to go to your GP." It wasn't a job to even say to me, but I asked because I was having to use a pillow even lying down to try because it wasn't comfortable, but I never thought for a minute it was cancer. So anyway, um, I was diagnosed with breast cancer October 2020 right through COVID,
that's
right
during
into
COVID time.
21.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was terrible. You couldn't bring your mum or your husband with you. The docs, you had to go yourself. I mean, I had to have an interpreter with
yeah.
me all the time. I wanted that. You know, sometimes I would get a last minute appointment and I would have to go with my mum. And it was terrible with the masks, and I got really frustrated. And I was asking maybe, the health professionals, can you remove your mask? And they were terrified to move it and they didn't know what to do. It wasn't a great experience. It really did hit me.
So your journey, in a way, was one that you took yourself. You didn't really have any
No,
support on that
my
journey, not even interpreters.
my support was the interpreter and I wasn't even allowed a hug. I mean, I would get home and I would tell my mum and dad and I would be crying and hugging them and I told them the bad news about the cancer. But when people have the masks on, you can't see the expression. You can't get that body language, that sort of recognition, if you like. It's really tough.
So, Colleen, you were diagnosed, and that must have come as a shock. So, how long was it from diagnosis to treatment?
Well, I went to the GP after the physio, right? So anyway, it was a bad time because of COVID. People didn't know how to, there was lots of people off with flu and things like that, and they were really reduced and staffed. So I thought I'll just see the nurse because I couldn't get to see the GP. So I thought that's better than nothing. And the nurse had a look and she said, I I feel there's something there. She wouldn't say it was cancer, but the nurse herself had been through breast cancer.
That's quite
She
helpful. Mm.
Yeah, it was actually. She immediately took her mask down to tell me. I couldn't get an interpret because it was last minute. And I would say maybe 2 days. I
Oh,
was
that's
referred
quick.
to the hospital. Yep, it was really quick.
So, okay. Um, so then you kind of went to surgery and everything, but you had a difficult time really because that was all through COVID.
Oh,
And did you find the effect of that really emotionally?
totally affected me. The masks were just barriers to everything. I mean, trying to communicate even with family, I just felt so isolated and alone, and the
Yeah.
anxiety was terrible. And it was just a hard time. Sometimes you just weren't getting the information.
Okay, so at that time, of course, you didn't know about the MacMillan Deaf Cancer Support Project
Nope.
because it was just setting up back then.
Yeah, it was after I had chemo and I'd lost my hair that I asked for a wig. I just thought I need to get a wig,
Uh-huh.
and someone had recommended me go to Maggie's. So first I went there, it was obviously closed because of COVID,
Yeah.
so I had to wait all this time. So I was using all the kind of like warm kind of hats, and when you've got no hair at all in any part of your body, the cold hits you, and I was really quite ill, but I got through it. I got through it.
Oh, well done you, and it's lovely to have you here. I'm pleased to see you got through it, and it's great to have you here with us.
Thank you.
Um, so you went through that, and when you later found out that there was this thing called MacMillan Deaf Cancer Project, but I'm going to come back to you about that because I'm going to go to Nikki and say, how difficult is it to support people like Colleen? Well, honestly, COVID, before COVID, we were providing face-to-face support locally because it was all on the voluntary basis. Um, so deaf cancer patients were receiving a kind of full service. But then, of course, COVID hit. And that changed everything. It changed everything about our service. We weren't sure what we could do. We decided to change everything onto Zoom so that we could keep in touch
Yep.
with people and keep, our peer groups running and that sort of thing, so that people still had access to support from each other. And of course, through COVID, there are we had lots of requests for people to try and help them contact their GPs because you couldn't go to GP face to face. You had to make phone calls. And that was very difficult for deaf people. But there was a rapid response line. So if a cancer patient was going through treatment and they were experiencing kind of raised temperature or something like that, we could contact this rapid response line and get the person taken to hospital. But for most people, it was really difficult to access this phone line, right? Colleen's
Yeah.
not. Was that
Yeah.
your experience, Colleen, as well?
Sorry, guys. Yeah, that's what happened to me. Told the hospital when I get rushed to hospital I was deaf, and that my husband was deaf, and they kept phoning. all to my parents to get to me, and it was like, oh, there was just nothing that there was
So
this.
it's
It was
set,
a hearing system,
yeah,
really.
set up for hearing people. Nikki? Well, the nurses, I think, were aware of the barriers at the nurse level. Sorry, that's my sign for
Ah,
nurse.
I
Nurse,
was
everyone's got
wondering
a
what that
different sign
was.
for it. It's very regional. That's my sign for nurse. There's so many signs for nurse. I usually use whichever sign, my deaf client uses. But the nurses, I found, were very well aware of the barriers. We were saying, please text message, because usually with cancer patients, they often feel very weakened. They're very ill. So, um, explaining symptoms through email and things is very difficult for a lot of people. There are so many barriers. And the National Health Service, where we are, we're allowed to send out text messages for reminders, automated reminders of appointments, and so on. But you can't do it the other way around. You can't text in. So again, that was a barrier. So a lot of the hospitals around were very difficult to access through COVID. It was a really terrible time.
I totally agree.
Okay, so we've established that there are lots of barriers through COVID, text messaging, internet, Zoom, but we're back to face-to-face. So did you have interpreters coming with you with masks and so on? Can I ask, this leads me on to my next question, really. Colleen, when you were going through your cancer, what was the biggest barrier? Was it access to information? At the point of diagnosis, were you given a kind of massive pack of information in English that was difficult to understand, or was it easy to read, or where were the barriers?
Well, Avro, my first sight, my language is BSL, and there was lots of these big words, and it was all in English. And also, a lot of the times they're firing all this stuff at you, and it just goes over your head because you're in a state of shock. I kept forgetting things as well at the time.
Okay. So you didn't feel that the information you received was particularly suited to you if you'd had that information on video, for example, in sign language, because I mean, I'm assuming that if you have just been diagnosed with
Mhm.
cancer, your brain goes into sort of shock, and that becomes a barrier to accessing information. So in a sense, you've got a double set of barriers there. So trying to find access to that information in sign language, I think, should be very important. Nikki, is this something that you advocate for, to have these materials accessible in BSL? Well, MacMillan are still now trying to improve access in BSL. They're working on that through producing videos, and they've produced quite a few already that are signed and subtitled, but there's more work to be done. And we want to see a further development on that as we move forward. But cancer patients need to be, they need information, but so do deaf carers, people who are looking after someone with cancer. It's very important.
You're totally right. We have to think about the other people that are around the cancer patient, because I know personally from personal experience that you tend to focus on the person who requires the help, but forget about everybody all around. So that's really good, useful information, Nikki. And it's great that you've got some resources. What we'll do is we'll put a link to your website in the feed, so that hopefully people can then get access to information and find it useful. So, Colleen, did you find anything in the website useful? Oh yeah, I mean, to be honest, before chemo, I couldn't really see anything. I couldn't read while I was during chemo. I couldn't see. I was lying down. I was just so ill. I wasn't well. I was weak. I wasn't fit. I couldn't walk properly. I was sort of staggering, having to hold on to things. I had to ask my mum to come. Communication, I couldn't. I wasn't interested in even chatting to anyone. But what I do remember was food, and really being sensitive to food and being sick all the time. I had tablets that kind of prevented that happening. It calmed it down, but
So
it was you just weren't interested in anything. That's why, see, like, you just weren't fit to do anything. But once I'd got radiotherapy, and I'd finished that, I'd 3 weeks of that, someone had actually approached me, and I think it was the BBC or something like that. It was a person from the BBC. I heard that you had cancer, breast cancer, and asked me if I would like to be involved in their group of Deaf Cancer UK. And I was like, wow, yes. I mean, thank you for giving me this information. So I made contact. It was the best decision I ever did. And, you know, it was great, the face to face, but, I'm
So you,
better at Zoom and things like that now.
so you actually went along to Nottingham, did you? So have you've been to Nottingham and you met Nikki and other people involved in the cancer project, Colleen? Was it Nottingham that you
Oh,
went to?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I went to Nottingham with my husband, and I'm telling you, it was worth it. We went to workshops. There was lots of lectures and speeches and talks. Met new faces, and I realised that I wasn't the only one. I had other people that were in the same situation, and it
Love.
was great just to talk to everyone.
And everyone was empathetic, I'm sure, because they're
Yeah,
going through the same
men,
thing too.
yep, and men and women. And I know for other people they think I might be far, but we didn't have it in Scotland, and I needed that. And maybe one day Scotland could set something up. That would be amazing. We don't
We'll
have
come to
nothing.
that later, and I'm planning to ask Nikki that question. But back to Nikki just now. Nikki, you've been providing this support. So could you say, you said you've been running 5 years. Could you give us an idea of how many deaf people you might have supported in that time? Well, I'd say altogether it's over 30, who've been in touch with the project and who we've provided direct support to, over 30 individuals, yeah.
And are most of these individuals, is it a male or female, or?
They're mostly women. We do support men as well. We do support men. But what we're finding is that men are still reluctant to come forward. They don't want to talk openly about their situation. So that's something that we're working on at the moment. We're hoping to challenge and to try and make sure that we're welcoming and accessible to men. But we do support both men and women.
Well, I've got some questions that came in from our audience. So I'll kick off with the first question, and this question is from Erin McCluskey. And here it is. It says, thank you, Colleen, for sharing your story. Really brave. Just wanted to ask, did the fact of knowing that there was a deaf cancer support helped to ease the emotions you would experience throughout your journey after the diagnosis?
So
So did you
when
feel?
you got to the group afterwards, it was later for you, wasn't it, Colleen? Because you weren't aware of the group at the point of diagnosis. So you joined later, and did that help you feel
Yeah,
better?
it was later on than I would have honestly wished. If I'd have been advised about it earlier, I would have had reduction in anxiety, less stress, but I got there in the end.
That's useful, and I suppose it's never too late,
It's
right?
true.
At least you got there in the end, and that's important. I'm just looking at my screen here. We've got a question for Nikki coming in. Which is saying, Nikki, how did you start working to support deaf people living with cancer? Do you have any specific degrees or qualifications, or was it a specific experience that made you want to get involved in that kind of work? No, really, my background is I develop projects. So where there are gaps in services, I roll my sleeves up, get stuck in and set something up. So no specific degree or anything like
Wow.
that, but a lot of lived experience, I suppose. And this project, I think, before this project, I was working locally in Derby, Nottingham, and around that area, and realized that there were so many barriers. I had been accompanying other deaf women on their journey to hospitals, to GPs, and with their family. And so I'd learned through that experience, and it really opened my eyes. So that's when I realized there were all these barriers, both to access to service and in translation and all sorts of things.
Yeah, it's almost like you've got the degrees of life experience. It's great, people having qualifications, but the fact that you've got that first-hand account and that you're able to identify the barriers as a result of that, it's amazing.
Exactly, and I think what has helped me is in the past I've worked as a welfare rights officer. I've worked at the Citizens Advice Bureau as an advisor, so I've worked in a lot of advocacy kind of roles, and I think that really helps with this project because a lot of that sort of work is involved.
Could I come in?
Yes, please do.
Well, I know like a lot of places that used to be there for deaf people have all been shut down, and I look at in Scotland, and it's the only place I know in the whole UK that is actually a place where deaf people can go and get the same support as hearing people. I just wish it was here in Scotland.
Oh, thank you.
I think I'm going to have to ask this question because Colleen keeps going on and on. Can I ask, what about your project? Is it just local or have you got them anywhere else?
Well, starting April 2021, 2 years ago, MacMillan realised the importance of this service and have agreed to roll it out nationally. So we will be coming to Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland and England. But at the moment, we're still going through the kind of early stages of that, putting in the foundations, getting everything ready to roll it out. So hopefully we will be coming to Scotland, Colleen,
You're
soon.
very
So we will be
welcome.
providing support. We're looking to develop that.
Oh, that's so good. It's wonderful that we've got this opportunity at the BDA to actually put you in touch with our wider community because it's just so good for them to know about this. So as you were saying, you're developing it nationally. So you're going to have sort of teams everywhere because I think you've only got 3 staff at the moment. Is that right? So what's the plans for the future?
At the moment, yeah. Because we're now working on this digital project, everybody on the team has been working remotely. So we are planning to come back to more face-to-face services. But we need more time to kind of establish the foundations of that before we roll that out nationwide.
I've got another question in from Debbie Watkins. And this question's to you, Nikki. And saying, first of all, your support group is amazing. This is fabulous information, and thank you for sharing your experience. So she's asking, are you looking for more volunteers to join your support group?
Always. Always, we need more volunteers. Always, please. Men, women, anyone from all kinds of different backgrounds with different skills, different experiences. MacMillan will provide training.
Ah,
Self-Help UK will provide an induction and training, but we provide the induction, MacMillan provide the training. So it's a wonderful opportunity for you to develop because you'll get training and you'll be part of volunteering as part of a group.
so it means that someone like Debbie who wanted to be a volunteer, should they contact you now or wait?
Yes, just contact us through our website. There's a form there for people who are interested in becoming volunteers. So if you're even thinking about it and you just want to know more information about how that works, you might want to work in fundraising, you might want to work providing one-to-one emotional support, or it could be publicity, giving speeches and outreach. There's all kinds of avenues that you could pursue, and we'll provide opportunities to meet your skills and interests.
Well, for our audience at home, if anybody's interested, please go to Self Help UK's website and volunteer. You maybe have a deluge of people tomorrow.
Wonderful. I'll be very happy.
So does it have to be deaf people or could it be hearing people?
We won't welcome anyone as long as they can sign. That's what's important to us. We know that there are deaf people who don't sign, who use oral communication, and it's important that we also provide support to them. So we aim to provide an equal access, really, to deaf people of all kinds of backgrounds and communication forms.
Colleen, you've been through this journey of cancer and you're now in recovery. Is it something that you would think about becoming a volunteer? I'm just, how if someone's got no experience of cancer, is it worth them becoming a volunteer? What do you think? Oh, that's a good question, Avro. Maybe I think I'd be like maybe like a friend to someone, like meet in Maggie's centre, so talk to someone who's got cancer, just to have that kind of friendship.
A befriender, yeah, for coffee and things, yeah.
Yeah, because in my experience, that's what I needed. Um, because everybody has different cancers and it affects you in different ways. And I would be so scared I would be given the wrong information. So I can talk about my own breast cancer, and that's it.
So that's what you can empathise with. Okay, can I ask Nikki, what about volunteers who've got no experience of cancer? Are they welcome, or can you tell us more about that? Really, what we're looking for in a volunteer is somebody who's patient, somebody who has the time,
A good attitude.
a positive attitude, yeah, and is able to maintain confidentiality. We're very, very strict on that in our project because the deaf community is very small. If you're volunteering with us, you're going to be exposed to information that is sensitive. It's really important that you keep that confidentially. With the peer group, all of the members of the peer group have to sign a confidentiality agreement, everybody on the team, so that we all understand that deaf people need to feel safe. They need to feel safe in the group. They need to feel safe receiving the service. So we really, really hammer home the importance of confidentiality.
Yeah, I think it's so important to have that respect and understand the sensitivity of each person's journey. Well, I've got more questions for you. I had the list of questions. We've covered quite a bit of it, but there's more coming in. There's more questions coming in for our audience as well. So I've never I'd heard of this. Oh, I've heard of them doing a walk, Deaf for Deaf. I think it's for men that raise money. But I've never had the opportunity to actually sit down and have a discussion with them.
Well, Deaf for Deaf have a question for us right now. They said, it's amazing work you're doing. Great to know this service is offered nationally with developments in place. Do you offer counselling and therapy for families with cancer sufferers as well as individuals? Well, for one-to-one emotional support, that's what we offer. We don't offer formal counselling. We're very clear about that. We're not qualified counsellors. We're here for you to learn information, have a chat, and we will signpost you to those experts who have more in-depth knowledge and are able to give you more in-depth counselling. But the counselling itself is not a service that we provide.
Thank you for that. That's a lovely answer to that question. So let me just look at my sheet again with the questions. I'm sorry, I've got a list of questions I'm desperate to ask, but I'm noticing the audience are asking a lot of questions as well. So could I ask this both to Nikki and Colleen? We have different kind of signs and treatments for chemotherapy or radiotherapy, and we know the signs are different. I know you are not medical, but I don't want people out at home to be confused. Can you maybe I'll ask Colleen, what kind did you go through? Chemotherapy, surgery, radiotherapy? Well, I had chemotherapy first, Avro, because what they wanted to do was shrink the actual tumour. And once it was small enough, it meant they could remove it rather than having a full mastectomy. So it really depends on the location of where it is in your breast. So I had chemotherapy to reduce my tumour to 4 centimetres. And they said there was lots of cancer cells everywhere and right up to my lymph nodes too. And that is very risky because when it's in your lymph nodes, it could spread all over your body. So I just thought to myself, do you know what? It's just a boob. I'd rather be alive. You know, I had to accept that they would take everything off and remove it. But I knew, I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm still a woman and I still feel, there's part of me missing, but I have to accept it as part of the journey.
And have you been through chemotherapy as well, Colleen? And
Both,
radiotherapy as well?
yeah, radiotherapy too. So I had the chemotherapy, then I had surgery, and then I had radiotherapy. And uh, the radiotherapy is amazing. The machine is incredible. And I went into an MRI machine for them to check if all the cells were gone. And the staff were so lovely. And they were even even lifting their mask down as if they were doing something in trouble just to make sure I was happy there. And everything was wonderful at the hospital.
Lovely. I'm going to come back to Nikki about these different forms of treatment for cancer. Yeah, when you're talking about chemo, it tends to be signed differently in different regions of the country. But also, there are different forms of chemotherapy. For example, you might have chemotherapy in the back of your hand, you might have it here, or even orally. So there are different forms of chemotherapy. It's
Oh,
not
well,
just
that's good.
one thing. Yeah, it can be administered in different ways. So yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
like up your arms, and honestly, you can end up bruises up your arms. I can remember um, that I had a nosebleed just because of the tablets, but you were all bruised everywhere.
It's the same with the signs for radiotherapy. Some people sign radiotherapy. I sign radiotherapy
Ah,
because of that green cross. So radiotherapy. But there's so many different signs. Depends on where you live, really.
oh, thank you. That's good for that understanding. Oh, Avro, could I ask something?
Yeah, please do.
Right, regarding chemo, you are very ill with chemo. It's worse than radiotherapy. Don't think they're the same thing. Radiotherapy is just it's like all of this radiation, and what you're getting is maybe your breast skin could be dry, but honestly, radiotherapy is a doddle.
That's
Chemotherapy is a
internal.
different ballgame.
Yeah, it's kind of like some people say it's a bit like a tattoo, the radiotherapy. It
That's
looks like
right,
you've
they
got
do.
a
They put
tattoo.
a tattoo dot on your boob. They do
Yeah,
that. They do.
yeah. Well, thanks for that, folks. Can I ask Nikki, I think perhaps, what's the most common issue that you support? You know, do you have a kind of frequent service that you have to provide? What's the most frequent thing? I think the most common thing for us is interpreting. Because interpreters perhaps don't turn up. So that leads to delay in the appointment and the treatment. If the GP refers someone to, it's called a cancer pathway. It's usually quite speedy. It's usually within 2 weeks you get referred to the hospital, and then from the hospital, you know, you're diagnosed, and then you get a pathway. But for deaf people, that time takes so much longer because of the availability of interpreters and booking interpreters. So deaf people living with cancer treatment face delays because of the lack of availability of interpreters. So that is a number one common problem, and it's still happening now.
I would agree with that.
Oh, that's an experience you've had, Colleen, as well. Okay. And Nikki, you were speaking to me earlier about an issue with translation. Could you tell us about that? Yeah, I mean, often there's an agency, or the hospital have an agreement with an agency because they're the cheapest agency. So the interpreters may not, in fact, be fully qualified. They might not be experienced in the medical domain. They're not aware of translation issues pertaining to cancer. So it might be, I knew someone who had esophageal cancer, and went regularly for treatment, but realized they were feeling worse and worse and worse. And it wasn't until one of our volunteers sat in on one of these appointments that they realized that the hospital were using all kinds of different interpreters, whoever was available, you know. So the interpreter who came in didn't know this person's background, didn't know their treatment, the treatment plan. So they had esophageal cancer, and with that, you're not allowed to take liquids through the throat, right? So the interpreter had been signing away, and the oncologist had been saying, you can drink, but you must take little drinks. And the interpreter was, and I don't mean to be, you know, discriminatory to interpreters. It's just the situation. But the interpreter was saying, "Oh, you can drink," and using drink at the mouth. But actually, that's wrong. And it wasn't until the volunteer sat in on the session, they were able to say to the interpreter, "Can I clarify, when you say drink, are you meaning drink by the mouth, or are you meaning pouring drink into the tube that you have to facilitate the intake of liquid, because you can't take it through the mouth?" And it was this that was making the person more and more ill, because fluid was building up in their lungs, because they were doing the wrong thing based on the translation that the interpreter had made. I know lots of interpreters would, in that situation, ask for clarification and ask questions, but we need, it's a very standard complaint.
You know, I mean, it is so important that anybody going to do a job like that, if they don't know the and understand the cancer terminology, then they have to ask. You know, we've got, you know, I'm sure there's lots of people that might have similar experiences, and I can tell you we have so many questions coming. There's one coming in from Ross Grant. And you were talking, Nikki, about, you know, this having a national service, but Ross is asking, how can local deaf organisations get involved? How can we help support?
Hello, Ross. Please contact us, contact our service, get in touch with our service, and that will be passed on to me. I would be delighted to meet with you and chat with you about how we can support each other. Because at the end of the day, our aim is really to support deaf people and make sure deaf people get the support that they need. That's the priority of our project. We're here to make sure deaf people access support. So please do get in touch with our service.
You know, I do agree, though. I think it's important that deaf organisations should be promoting your kind of work. You know, it's not for us to do the work, it's for us to signpost to the experts, you know, and making sure that deaf people, you know, up and down the country know about your service. And I'm sure your service is going to grow as a result of it. But we're there. I think it is. We should work together, all of the organisations, as part of a kind of signposting exercise. We've got more questions coming in, and we've got one from Leslie Quinlan. And she's talking about what are the kind of symptoms, the silent symptoms of cancer? Oh, that's a good question, Avril. I think I need to pass to Nikki for that.
Well, do you mean things that you wouldn't necessarily pick up on as symptoms? Yeah.
Yeah.
Some cancers you honestly don't know about. You can be, going about your everyday business happily until it's honestly too late. There are sometimes no symptoms.
Is there any symptoms or things that we should not ignore, or maybe
So,
something relating to a particular cancer?
yeah, certainly with the bowel cancer, um, that's an important one. A lot of people mistakenly think that's irritable bowel syndrome, IBS.
Yeah, you're right, because it's hard to tell because some of them, the symptoms are quite similar.
So that's a silent cancer. Also womb cancer, cancer of the womb, cancer of the cervix. These can be very difficult to diagnose because the symptoms aren't really obvious. People often think, oh, I'm just going through the menopause. That must be what it is. I've got the menopause. And then they realize actually they've got cancer. So we always recommend going to your GP, asking for a blood test, getting that checked, check for levels of protein. And this is the same for men as well with prostate cancer. So ask for a blood test. It won't always give you the answer, but it is a good indicator, and you can ask for that test, and it will at least give you some information. That's why education is so important in terms of helping us
Yeah.
with early intervention. If we understand our bodies more, we can notice something isn't right. We can notice a difference, and we can say to the GP, something feels wrong. And that's the really important point.
And that saves the panic and the anxiety. You can just go to the GP.
Yeah, so as soon as you see something, you should go to the GP for peace of mind, really, I suppose.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of cancers, it sounds like, that are quite silent, that don't really
I
have
mean,
symptoms.
I still have a trauma in my head, even although I've been told I'm in remission, I still, anytime there's a source anywhere in my
Yeah.
body, it feels a bit painful. I think, oh no, it's back.
And another silent cancer is pancreatic cancer, and that often people don't know they have that
Mm.
until their eyes turn yellow, their skin starts to turn sallow and yellow, and they realize that there's something going wrong, but they didn't realize that they had it. So it can be very difficult to diagnose.
You know where your nipple is? Um, some of where the nipple is, sometimes if the nipple is actually inwards or sticking out too much, that could be an indicator. Didn't or you maybe
Yes,
touching it
if
would
it's
be sore?
inverted,
Yeah.
yeah, I suppose it depends on your body because some people have that anyway, don't they? Okay, so for some of these questions, there aren't easy answers, are there? Thank you,
I
Colleen.
know.
Honestly, I can't tell you how many questions we've got coming in here. Let me see. Deaf for Deaf want to just respond to your answer, Nikki. Thank you for your answer, Nikki. Do you plan to introduce a therapy service for those that require further intervention rather than signpost to perhaps an interpreted therapy service? We provide end-of-life therapy to clients, and this was extremely important, and we hope that you can offer this service in the future. Nikki, is that something you're going to be offering? Well, at the moment, we are planning cancer support nationally, but this won't happen until after the summer because we're focusing on this new project. So we'll be developing that initially. But I'm going to make sure that Deaf for Deaf are going to be involved. I'll be contacting you to work together to provide counselling services. Yeah.
Oh, thank you for that. We've got a question in now from Linda Richards, and it's just about to come up on your screen. Um, Linda's making a point regarding you were mentioning about the interpreters and the word that was used, drinking. And Linda's saying it's still the interpreter's responsibility to check the context of drinking, though.
I can understand though. I mean, I think it's important that it's not always black and white, is it? It's not always clear. You know, sometimes a situation just happens, someone's under pressure to go and provide that service, and they might not know the individual's cancer history, their background. So always ask and make sure that the interpreter that you're being provided is a qualified interpreter. That's the only thing that we can suggest. Not a level 4 interpreter, a registered qualified interpreter. Please make
Couldn't agree
sure
more.
that you get one of those.
Colin, did you have any issues with interpreters even although you were going through COVID? Well, at the beginning, I got interpreters and I knew the person and it was the same person, and I preferred the same person. I'll tell you why. Because this person knew me and I'd worked with this person before, and I felt having the consistency, and that person didn't take a holiday. You know, if there was a different interpreter, I accepted it, but I was quite lucky.
Thank you so much. We've got another question coming in. And this is again linked to a silent and unseen cancer. So again, Linda's saying ovarian cancer is a silent and unseen cancer. Oh yeah, absolutely. That is a silent cancer. Yeah, totally.
You know, you think about it, you you've got you down there, you've got your periods, you've got your cramps, I mean, your womb is active for a long time, and I've known now that a lot of women are talking about this. This is something we have to get checked.
Okay, this is a lovely comment that's just come in from Peach Folks. I did not know how. I know my dog saved me. Animals do seem to have that
Yeah,
instinct. I've heard this before.
they
They
can
can smell
smell
it.
it, Avril.
Yeah. Wow. What do you think about that?
I totally believe it.
Yeah.
I am a convert. One of my friends told me that. See, some people say differently, but I just believe it.
I think um, I know these stories of dogs saving people, and I think these are wonderful, wonderful stories. But what I think about in terms of the project is that the more deaf people who've been through cancer and their carers, because they're part of the story as well, they're part of the journey, the more stories we share through sign language, the more deaf people are going to understand what this is all about, because we haven't had access to these stories before. We haven't had access to what these journeys are about. But now more and more deaf people are coming forward. I think that's really important.
They're coming in quick and fast, honestly. So I think it is important that I return to the community's question, even though I'm desperate to ask my own. We have a question from Magella McAteer. And Magella's asking, she's wondering if your services could provide the information such as like advanced care planning and how to make a will, or have someone there to help make a decision for the patient if there's a terminal illness. What do you do in those circumstances?
Yeah, Colleen, did
No,
you want to?
over to you,
Oh, you're
Nikki.
putting me, are you? Okay. Our advocacy officers will provide that kind of support to someone if you're thinking about your needs and what you want in those circumstances. They can talk through your options, signpost you to the right services. But I agree, end of life care is and support in that is vital. And it's carers also need a lot of support at that point. Hospices are honestly, there are a lot of barriers to hospices, so we need a lot of support in accessing services in that area.
Oh, thank you for that, Nikki. That's an important question, I think, about to come up. Hang on. And this again is from Linda, and it's linked to what you were just saying about the hospice. So will you advertise or send information about your service to hospices so that they're aware that you're out there? I mean, I can tell you from my point of view, Nikki, I never knew anything about hospices.
We don't. Usually when someone contacts our services, our peer group officer will when they get a referral, they'll talk to them more deeply about that referral. in the past, we did do kind of partnership support in hospices. We have done that in the past. But at the moment, our digital project, well, we find digital services and hospice services don't marry very well. So please, if any of you have any concerns or worries about hospices, please get in touch with us so that we can work together to improve your access to hospices, because we're officially a kind of pilot project here. So we are hoping for continuity of funding. And really, we're looking for you to tell us what the problems are out there that we need to address. And we're really open to working together with others and partnerships.
So maybe organisations out there, or hospices, or people, maybe members of families that know, but other people that maybe get into hospices or what's happening. I think they could contact you. What about you, Colleen? I can remember one of my friends, and they were transferred into a hospice, and it was through the NHS.
So you think that the NHS really should be rolling out this service and there should be access everywhere? Okay, let's
Yeah.
have a look. What else is coming in? We have a question from Lou Hansen. Hi, Nikki and Colleen. Lovely to see you both. Can you advise what interpreters can do to support your project and help to spread the news of your services? So if someone's an interpreter, obviously they meet lots of people. How can they help advertise your service and market your service for you?
Colin, do you want to come in?
Well,
Oh, you, Nikki, you go for it.
I would say we've been really lucky in our project. We've been really lucky. We have great relationships with the interpreters around us. They help us to spread awareness of our project. They often carry cards, information cards about our service. So if they're in hospital with someone who is diagnosed with cancer, they will give them our card.
It's really useful.
Which is great. Yeah. So we work really closely with the interpreters in our area, and they often contact our service to say, what's the sign for this? And obviously we recognize that there are regional differences in sign language, but and we also, we're not the sign language police. We're not BSL experts, but we do kind of signpost people to, you might want to check it with this person, try checking with this person. So we work collaboratively. We work very well together.
Would you believe time is marching on, but I've got a few questions of my own. And also, I just have to say to the audience, thank you so much for your wonderful questions. But before we wrap up, I really want to try and get these couple of questions in. So you both have spoken about the barriers. Colin, you've shared your journey and your experience, but could I ask both of you, if you were to look to the future and you had a crystal ball, what would be your hopes and your dreams? So I suppose from you, Colin, a personal perspective, I mean, obviously you don't want to go through that again, but what would you like to see sort of improved? Like you're saying, like you would love the MacMillan Deaf Cancer Support Group to come to Scotland. So what would you like, Colin? And then next, Nikki. I think for me, I would love to see deaf people going to educational workshops, learning about cancer, making sure that we knew, like what Nikki was saying. I'd love to have that here in Scotland. I'd love to see this up here.
So maybe in
And
deaf clubs and deaf
yeah,
centres,
absolutely. Wherever
and more
deaf
things
people
like
meet.
this,
Yeah,
and
means like
workshops on
the
Zoom.
BDA. There's Deaf Action in Edinburgh. There's organisations.
Anything else, Colleen? Anything about interpreters or anything like that? Because we talked about that tonight. Do you think interpreters need more training? Do you think some input on cancer for interpreters would be good?
Yeah, I think you have to remember there's some interpreters are human beings as well, and they might be sensitive to blood. And when you're getting in chemo, there's a lot of injections. There's also some interpreters who've maybe been through cancer and they feel that they can't go there. I was lucky with my interpreter.
So maybe interpreters helping with the emotional support and as well as interpreting.
It's all
Well,
about the attitude, Avril, honestly.
Nikki, from your project's point of view, what would you like to see in the future? Well, from this cancer project, we realise we've kind of opened the floodgates, really, and we've begun to see where the barriers are. So we realise how much there is to take on now. And it's a very broad spectrum of work. But really, in the future, I think I would like to see that we, as the deaf community, I'd like to see us talking about cancer more openly. I think
Mental
we
health
need
as
to
well.
talk about it. We need to say the word. We need to say what is cancer. We need to, because there's a lot of negativity, there's a lot of fear around this word. I think it's good to talk about it, get it out in the open, and talk about the services that are available. A lot of deaf people think cancer is a death sentence. It's not. Treatments have improved so much. People live so much longer post-diagnosis than they ever did before. There are so many positives. If you
True.
get cancer, it can be quite a positive thing. I mean, there are lots of positive things about that. So I want the community to realize that it's not this terrible death sentence. There are peer groups. If you want to establish one, contact our service. Claire, who's our peer group officer, can help you set up your own regional peer group.
Wow.
We're there to support you.
And I think you're absolutely right. The first step and the most important step is talking and having that
Yes.
conversation about cancer. And Colleen said it was important for her that there was workshops, and that's what it is. It's about talking about it, getting it out. Yeah, I totally, Avril. We need the education. We don't need to be afraid anymore. Our mental health is suffering. We need to get that out in the open and encourage good mental health.
So you're thinking of workshops that would talk about cancer, but would also talk about the mental health and the emotional side of that cancer experience. So,
Absolutely.
Colleen, if you were to pick some kind of topics, you would cover mental health. What else would you cover?
Exercise, diet, how for you when you're going through chemo, how to eat properly. Also about maintaining a friendship group, but because you shouldn't be isolated at home. It's not good. It's not good for anyone. Certainly not good for deaf people. You need that support around you.
Can I just come in, Avril, as well on that and say, I think hospitals, doctors, nurses need to understand more about accessibility of information. Some of them don't realize that the information isn't accessible. There's a leaflet there, you're okay. So they don't understand patients' rights and accessible information. I think we need to get that very important message out there. And I think it doesn't matter what kind of cancer, I think, or even if it is cancer, if you're having any kind of operation, you have to sign a medical consent form. Ask your doctor for more time with your interpreter to translate that medical consent form, because you need to be aware of what's in that. And the interpreter will help translate what it says. Don't just kind of go, oh yeah, I agree, and sign. We
Good
see
point.
it very often. We see it very often in a number of cases.
Yeah,
Oh, they gave me a piece of paper. I didn't know what it was. I signed it. Don't
yeah.
do that. If you don't understand, ask the interpreter to translate it for you.
Great
A
advice.
medical consent form is really important. You really need to pay attention to that.
Colin, did that happen to you? I know you had interpreted. Did they? Well, sometimes, as I said to you before, Avril, I couldn't get an interpreter. My mum had to come, but she wasn't allowed to take her mask off. I think I had to sign something at a hospital. I remember them explaining something. There was an interpreter there, and there was I had to sign something before my surgery. I think that was all.
Okay. I think this is going to have to be the last question. We can just squeeze one more in. And this is from Joyce Dixon. who says it would be good to have a workshop about cancer. Deaf people need a lot of explanation around cancer. Doctors don't really explain this enough to deaf people, and because they don't know how to explain it. I had cancer 34 years ago. I coped well, but I didn't have enough information at that time. So just another perspective on kind of changes that have taken place over 34 years, right?
When you think about that, I mean, that's so tough for people.
I'm sure things have improved, but we still need more, right? Am I right, Nikki? Yes, we do provide kind of cancer awareness training, but it's very basic. But we're not allowed to give medical advice
Yeah,
or information because we are not nurses.
yeah.
We're not qualified. So we hope to work together closely with MacMillan and to provide that kind of training together so that the nurses would be there to provide the medical information that backs up, anything that might come up from that training session, and we would provide cancer awareness.
That's very similar to what Maggie's centre does, and the boss there, she was really lovely, and she was just. I remember MacMillan or Maggie's, the people there were just saying you were really encouraging you and important for deaf people to contact your service and things.
So we've talked about Maggie's, we've talked about MacMillan. Are they the same thing or are they different? What's the difference between them?
Ah, the Maggie's is named after a person who went through cancer and she passed away, and her legacy was that she wanted to encourage cancer people to go there to this place and talk, and she's lots of wee places all over Scotland.
So I'm just trying to work out, is Maggie's a Scottish thing? Are they different services? What? No. We have Maggie's. It's just a different organization. So they provide support to cancer patients. I think all cancer charities and support groups really need to be aware to make sure that they have budgets to spend on language access, linguistic access. And then that doesn't matter whether it's a deaf support group or a hearing support group. I think language access is critical, because very often services won't pay for interpreters. So I think all
I
of the
would
cancer
find.
charities need to be more aware about provision of interpreters.
You'd mentioned that you had a sort of regular Zoom, a Wednesday and a Thursday. Just before we close, could you just tell us a wee bit about that?
Go
Colleen,
on,
do you want to
you
do
do
it?
it.
Oh, my memory's so bad. Um, well, basically, I didn't know how to do Zoom, and then I finally got on. So I'm hoping to be joining the group. But I'm really awful. I should have joined before. But yeah, this is a regular group.
Yeah, let me tell you, it's a Zoom a peer group. It meets regularly every Wednesday from 11 to 1, and we just chat together. We also have something similar on a Thursday
Ye-
evening.
We do games and cards.
Yeah, on Thursday evening is a little bit more of a social. Um, at the moment, that seems very popular. The Uno card game is a real winner in that group at the moment. Wednesdays is more a kind of it's an opportunity to meet other people, to share your experiences, to share your stories, to talk about your medication, your treatment, what tablets you're on, that kind of
That's
discussion.
right.
Yeah.
It's like having a coffee. And I know it's far going to Nottingham, but you just do it. It's so good.
Well, that's a good point, I think, to end. I'm sure we could talk for so much longer. But just to summarize, there is support there. If our audience are looking for support, they should contact you at MacMillan. There's a Zoom service for people who are going through that experience and people who have been through that experience as well. Nikki, just checking. Yeah. Yeah, all welcome. People who are going through or have been through the experience, and carers as well. It's really important to share that experience. Yeah, so people who haven't had cancer themselves, but who have cared for someone, they can join that group too. Yep, yep. The peer group officer will soon be setting up a specialist carers
Fantastic.
support group, where people can discuss their particular concerns. But you're still welcome to join us at the moment until that group is set up, because you still need to understand what's happening. You still need information. You still need to know how to get around the barriers. You'll still need to sign our confidentiality agreement. So important.
Leaving like menopause, I still don't know about that. You know, there's lots of things for women as well, cancer care as well as menopause.
So cancer can affect the menopause, and maybe
I
people
mean,
don't know about
I
that.
I had cancer at the same time as menopause, but I didn't know which was which. And that you would get sweats, and you can get that from cancer tablets, or was it from my body, just the hormones? It's really tough.
I see the confusion. So joining a group to discuss that would be really helpful, because you could ask others and find other people who are having the same experiences. I see.
I did at Maggie's, and I got the answer I needed.
And MacMillans do the same thing. So just finally, anything that either of you would like to say to our audience here tonight about cancer, any tips, any advice you might be offering them, any final words before we close? Nikki, over to you. I'd like to say, if you are feeling that there's something not right in your body, make sure you go to your GP and bother them if they say there's nothing there. If you feel
Yeah.
there is, just go back again. Keep going back, because it's important. Some deaf people will go to the GP, they'll explain one symptom. Maybe they'll say, oh, I've got a headache and I've got a tummy ache and I've got this. I know, I'll just say about the headache because that's the one that hurts most. So the GP is trying to make a diagnosis based on a headache alone and none of the other symptoms. So keep going. When you go to your GP, tell them all the symptoms that you're experiencing so that your GP can actually help you and you'll get a better diagnosis. So it's better to go just in case than not to go at all. If you feel there's something not right, go to your GP, get a blood test, bother your GP until you get what you need to make sure you know your body feels good. So just keep on at them. It's really important. Well, thanks for that advice and those tips. Any last comments, Colleen, that you'd like to add?
I think for women, I would say when you go in for a shower and you're using soap, please actually under your oxters and around your breasts, both breasts, please have a feel and check them. Sometimes you feel you can't be bothered or you think it's embarrassing, but please, I would urge you, check
And
your
that's the
boobs.
same for men. Can I say that's the same for men as well?
You're
Please
absolutely
check
right.
yourself, men. Check your testicles. Just check. Make sure if you feel a lump or one testicle is heavier than the other or one is swollen, go to your GP. It might not be cancer, it might be an infection, but go
True.
to your GP just in case and make sure you get something checked. Anything that doesn't feel right, get it checked.
Well, thank you so much. The questions have been so interesting tonight. And thank you so much, Colleen, for sharing your very, very personal story. And thank you, Nikki, for just sharing the important work that you and your team do. It's really a challenging job. It's face to face. It's so emotional. We're a deaf community that we're small, and a lot of the times we know each other. And I really hope that this project grows and grows and spreads all over the UK, particularly with their help as well. We need everybody to help. And I really would hope that, Nikki, you can come and join us in Scotland with Colleen and maybe do something.
I'd love to get involved. Yes, thank you. Thank you.
And I really want to say thank you to everybody at the audience at home for watching. Well, Honestly, Nikki, you might end up with breaking the internet tonight with everybody requesting to be a volunteer. But I just finally want to say thank you and bye to everyone at home.
Bye.